Hi, and good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar. I'm Phil Schaefer, Regional Director with the American College of Healthcare Executives National Office. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items. For the purposes of noise control, your lines will be muted during the duration of the session unless there's an active discussion at the end, at which point you may unmute yourselves to talk. You will also have the opportunity to submit questions throughout the discussion in the chat panel, so please feel free to submit your questions as needed. Today's session is worth 1.5 hours of face-to-face education credit. Credit will be applied in approximately 2 weeks from today. In order to receive your credit, you must attend this session for the full 90 minutes. To ensure your credit is applied, please be sure that you're using the Zoom platform on a computer or the Zoom app on a smartphone or tablet. Also, be sure that the name that you're using for the Zoom session matches the name of your registration. Also, please be sure to complete the evaluation for the session for ACHE. The evaluation link will be posted in the chat box shortly. The session is being recorded and will be available to listen in a few business days from today. And with that, I'd like to introduce Rodney Hollis, President-elect for the Indiana chapter of ACHE. Rodney, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Phil. Good afternoon, everybody. As Phil said, before we get started, I also have some housekeeping items that I want to bring to your attention. Thank you, though, for making time out of your day to join our virtual program. I would like to read really quick to you that this program right here, the Sustainable Strategies to Support Resiliency and Professional Well-Being panel discussion, the Indiana State Medical Association designates this live activity for a maximum of 1.0 AMA PRA Category 1 credits. Physicians should claim only the credit commensurate with the extent of their participation in the activity. Following this activity, we ask that physicians complete the evaluation, which is required in order to receive the CME credit. And so I am going to post the link to that survey, CME survey, in the chat right here, right now. And again, just make sure you complete that survey, and I'll also bring this up at the end of the program as well in my closing remarks. Next, I want to just make sure that I take the time to thank our sponsorships. We definitely appreciate your support and your dedication to our organization over the past few years. Without your support, events such as this would not be possible. So we are very thankful for your generous donations and your dedication to our organization. With that being said, I'd like to move forward and introduce our panelists. Panelists, you can introduce yourselves.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Angela LaSalle, Medical Director of Integrative Medicine for Parkview Health, and I will be your moderator today.
Hello, everybody. I'm Graham Carlos. I'm a practicing pulmonary and critical care physician at Eskenazi Health, where I also sit as Chief of Medicine.
I'm Jen Hartwell. I'm a trauma and acute care surgeon at Methodist Hospital in Indianapolis, and I also serve as the Chief Wellness Officer for IU Health Physicians in Indiana University School of Medicine.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jean Putnam. I'm the Executive Vice President and Network Chief Nursing Executive at Community Health Network in Indianapolis, and I oversee the professional practice of about 5,000 nurses.
Well, I'm very excited for this presentation today. I had the privilege of sitting with our panelists last week in a preparation call for this session, and they have a wealth of knowledge and insight into this topic about provider wellness. And certainly we know that providing healthcare with quality, safety, and cost efficient absolutely needs provider wellness at the forefront in keeping our teams going. And when we're talking provider wellness, we're not talking just about physicians, but also our nursing staff, our other professionals that are involved in patient care. And honestly, it's complete employee wellness all the way down to our housekeeping staff. And certainly this recent pandemic has redefined our thoughts about provider wellness and has expanded the need for a in-depth and quality discussion about what does this mean in these current and more recent days. So today what we want to do is talk about that redefinition of wellness and maybe expand those concepts of talking about provider resilience, talk about some metrics that might be useful to you as you evaluate your team, and also define the role of the leader in stepping forward for changing the wellness culture in your organization, giving you some rounding strategies, some ideas of how to identify at-risk providers, and talk about the concept of fostering post-traumatic growth. And certainly we've been through a very traumatic year. And I think it was Jean that brought that term to the table in our discussion, but I think it very, very much fits to today's discussion. And we also want to talk about how to overcome some barriers in the implementation of these strategies within the healthcare organizations. Certainly the problem is well defined. The suicide rate for physicians is perhaps double the general population, being as high as 28 to 40 out of 100,000, with upwards of 40% of physicians identifying some level of burnout in their profession. And it is a very costly problem for our organizations. As Jean brought up last week, it's what's the cost of not implementing is what we need to really take a look at. And it can be a dollar cost of anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million per physician when we talk about recruitment and trying to bring someone else up in those positions. So it's quite an expensive problem that we're facing in healthcare today. And we certainly, just from a human perspective, want to keep our team well and thriving. So as we move into talking about resilience, this is a term that often gets thrown around when we're talking about provider wellness. It's kind of a buzz phrase that's been brought up as the goal for wellness initiatives. However, the term resilience certainly has been stretched by our recent pandemic and perhaps needs some redefinition. Jen, would you mind kind of giving us your thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So I know that the concept of resilience is extraordinarily important, I think, for all of our daily lives. Just learning how to overcome setbacks, and we'll talk about that some more. But we all face setbacks, not just professionally, but personally, or challenges. And so I think the concept of resilience is obviously a very important one. I think it has been a little bit tough to understand what that means in healthcare, and especially in the last year. Some of the feedback I've gotten from some folks that I work with is, I am resilient. I made it through my medical training, and, and we made it through, tough times in COVID, and, talking about personal resilience as a strategy for wellness is kind of a tough one to really understand or to accept. And so there's been a little bit of pushback on that. So I think I'm just trying to be really sensitive around what that means for us moving forward. And I know when we did kind of our pre-session, actually, Graham, you had like just a lovely way of explaining this. And I just thought it was fantastic the way that you tackled that term. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Jen. So this is a tough term to apply to medicine. And I think we can either receive it for what it is, which is a meaning that providers have the ability to withstand hardship and to bounce back. So when COVID hits you, or when a difficult patient encounter hits you, or maybe it's a new administrative change, are you able to stand up in spite of that negative effect and overcome it? So we could receive it, we could reject it, and we could just say, this term, it doesn't really apply to medicine, and it's kind of overused and overdone, or we could redeem it. And I like the latter. What does resilience mean in healthcare? Clearly, resilient things are seen all the time in nature, right? We need to overcome obstacles to eat, live, and breathe as humans. But in healthcare, what does it mean? What are the stressors? What are the waves that are washing ashore and pounding against the rocks? What are the challenges in modern medicine that we need to be resilient to, that we need to overcome? And so I think it's a word that can be used, but with great caution and careful definition.
Jean, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I would just add that I'm trying to take the word resiliency out of my language a little bit. Not, I think it's a great word too, but I think we're all resilient, right? We've proven that. But I'm trying to work in this idea of post-traumatic growth, as you said, Angela, post-traumatic growth versus post-traumatic stress. I'm every bit as worried as for our leaders right now as I am for our first line caregivers. I feel like our leaders have had no break in healthcare, specifically right now. I feel like we are just we live it at work, we live it at home, and we just are. We have guilt over not being able to do enough for folks, and there's just a lot of stuff to unpack there. So, I think I don't know what the next word is. Like, Graham or Jen, you guys help me. Let's find a new word that we're going to use, right? That's like, what's above resiliency? I don't know what that is yet, but I think we just have to, whatever word resonates with people, that's what we have to use. But I do like the idea of how are we going to come out stronger from this, so that's what I'm trying to focus on. We'll see whether it resonates.
Absolutely. And I think it's important too to understand that in the length of a physician or provider, anyone in healthcare, in length of our career, the collective trauma is something that we have to be very sensitive to. So I think it's also important to help people develop strategies to not only sustain the trauma at hand, but also then to be able to let that go and not carry that with them along the path. So learning how to kind of unpack our luggage, so to speak, as we move through the length of our career is a very, very important concept for us to talk about. Certainly we understand that wellness starts from the top down, and we're here today with a group of wonderful healthcare leaders, and so I think it's important for us to address that sense of personal wellness and resilience with them as well as we go through this. And when we look at the wheel of wellness, it's not just our job position that is a part of that. It's the entire being. So it is physical, it is spiritual, it is family connectedness, it is sense of purpose, it is financial. It's all those stressors together that we have to consider when we're talking about the whole concept of wellness. So that's very important for our leaders to be sensitive to their own needs, and as we move forward with this as well. And that can also give some guidance into what their teams might need as we move forward. But when we talk from that top-down strategy, and the role of the leader in this drive for these wellness strategies, what are your thoughts? Do you feel like that this can be something that's kind of outsourced? Is it a kind of a checkbox on the to-do list that we can bring in a pre-made program, or is this something that is better tailored to the organization itself? And how would you give some ideas on how to go about that? How do you gather and decide what's the top priority for your organization? So Graham, why don't you lead us off on that one?
Sure. So, as physicians, first we need to make a diagnosis, or you'll never prescribe the right thing. So that's important. And to use an analogy, I'm not the trauma doc, by the way, I'm just the lung doc, but say a fractured bone. The miraculous thing about our bones is when they grow back, they grow back stronger after you've had a fracture. But several things need to take place first. First, you need that, diagnostician plus the radiologist to identify that there's a break. So that's step one. And in our organizations, that involves rounding on our physicians and providers to see where are the breaks. Number two, you need to align those bones together. There needs to be an adjustment, and action needs to be taken in response to that break. And then very importantly, steps 3 and 4, you need to protect it with the cast. You need to protect your employees, your direct reports to you. As leaders, one of our main roles is that we create an environment where people feel free to be candid, to share their worries, their concerns, their frustrations. They need to feel protected in order to have a thriving culture. And then we need to check back and make sure it's healing right. So we get another set of x-rays and make sure that the set is taking and the bone is healing before that kind of cast comes off. So I think that kind of analogy of a fracture has some applications to us in leadership. Make a good diagnosis, make an adjustment, protect, and then follow up.
Absolutely. So Jean, as you're dealing with, nursing staff and other professionals in your organization, how do you feel that this might be different for that group of people versus maybe dealing with the physicians or with the leadership team?
That's a great question. I haven't pondered really the differences in that as much as just, I feel like it's got to be hybrid. I think we need a hybrid model, because different things resonate with different people, right? And so Graham, what you just shared totally resonated with me as a clinician. But we have a lot of people who aren't even clinicians in our buildings, our facilities that that do really important work for us. And so I think it's got to be a hybrid of some, we can buy some things to come in and have people do, and certain education or resiliency kinds of things. But I think, sometimes it's just personal stories. And we've used our RISE team, which is our resiliency and stressful events, like a, critical response team. And they have been so helpful, particularly like for our ICU nurses, our ED nurses, where they've just come in and just let people talk. And how all of us feel better, right, after we sort of talk through a situation. That's why therapy is so good. And so I think we have to do what is, resonates with different people, and understand that that's going to look different for folks.
Jen, what about your experience with that?
Yeah, sure. So, you'd kind of asked about, is there a program that we should be looking to, and, how should we address this as leaders? And so one of the things that I strongly believe is that there is no program that is one size fits all. Nobody has, sort of the secret sauce for wellness. I really think it has to be team-based. And I think that leaders have to own wellness for their teams and not look to other people to implement a program in their team. We as leaders are responsible for those that we lead. I have 18 surgeons who report to me. Their wellness is my responsibility, whatever that looks like in my team. And then just kind of on a general scale, though, I think the system is responsible for, the overall organization is responsible for doing things that individuals can't do for themselves. And that involves things like reducing our administrative burdens, making our electronic health systems work for us, not against us, which are both known and documented drivers of burnout. My husband and I have one of our favorite bands is called Dolls, and a line in one of their songs is, I just want you to make my days move easier. And that's sort of my little wellness mantra, really, is, that's really what people want at the end of the day, is just make my day not painful, just make it smooth. And then what that does is it gives us the space to focus on relationships. And so I will always say that relationships are far and away more important than any program that any administrator could ever bring into a group, that it's always about our relationships. And that happens at a sort of team and individual level.
I'm going to open this up to all three of you, so any of you can jump in on this one. But what about how to foster leadership buy-in and provider buy-in? Because certainly a lot of times dealing with these kinds of programming and whatnot, when we have such busy days as it is, it's kind of one more thing on the to-do list. Oh, so I have to go to this special session that the health system is having for me on wellness, eye roll kind of thing. I have so many other things to do. Can any of you share any strategies that you've used in your organization on how to get that buy-in, either from the leadership or the recipients of the program?
Yeah, sure. A couple of thoughts come to mind for me. Is I would go back to what I just said about relationships. Is I have 4 kids, and my husband and I say that we can't parent all 4 kids the same way. They each need something different from us. So in order to engage our top level leaders, we have to find what speaks to them. So for some leaders, it's going to be the business case for wellness. And for some leaders, it's going to be the relational aspect of wellness. And for others, it's going to be the productivity aspect of having a healthy team. So I think the strategy from the highest levels has to be what makes your leaders sing. And that's what you have to lean in to get them to buy in, show them that it's meaningful work. And then there has to be some accountability, making it part of annual reviews or, a quarterly review or a metric that is discussed at reviews. There has to be some accountability. Tell me what you did to promote the well-being of your team this quarter.
Any other thoughts?
there's a story about how to get buy-in, and it goes kind of like this, that there's this hospital and they're really struggling with provider engagement, and nobody's happy. It's a bad culture. Everybody's griping all the time. And as they walk in and out of the hospital every day, there's a clock on the wall, and the clock doesn't have the time right. And that's just one more thing to add on top of everything else. This damn clock that, it's right twice a day and that's it. And the point of the story is that the first step this particular hospital did in getting buy-in is they fixed the damn clock first. They started with small, actionable wins. And then you want to let people know that, hey, we can do things. We can fix the clock. We can start somewhere. So start with actions that you can win, and make sure you let people know when that's been accomplished. That's something else we forget to do in medicine. You get a little dopamine bolus when you accomplish a task, and you get a serotonin bolus when you praise somebody for said task. So I think creating a culture of positivity, identifying challenges that we can fix in the short term as we work towards longer term solutions will help, like Jen said, bring in a lot of those people. And then we also, exactly, she was so perfectly on point when she said, you have to find everybody's why. So when you round on your providers, what's your why? Why are you here? So for some, such as myself, I have a huge passion for medical education and teaching the students and residents at the School of Medicine. That's a big part of my why. That might not be the same for some of my partners who might be trying to cure lung cancer, for example. So know all the whys, and then you can tailor your approach to each person.
Mhm.
And I'll just add that, I think one of the challenges that we have right now is that people are so tired, physically, emotionally exhausted. And so when do we provide sort of some of this work that we need to do, and then we need to help people get through this? And, we've gotten feedback from our providers as well as our other teams that they don't want to stay after anymore. I mean, and for the physicians, my physician colleagues, right? This is where you guys live outside, because your productivity is such a focus, and so you live outside of any other meetings happen outside that work, right? But that takes away from us too. And I think what we've learned from our providers and our other caregivers is that we've got to provide some of this during the day, and we have to carve out time and be specific about it. And whatever that looks like in terms of compensation or whatever, we need to make sure that we're doing this so that they're not staying after, they can get home and not have to feel like, okay, I've got another 2 hours here in meetings or whatever that is. So that's the only thing I'd add.
Yeah, so one of the creative things that one of our leaders did, actually, my VP, was he actually included, partnered with an organization to bring in like an 8-week online mindfulness program, and actually did that with the leaderships of his different specialties. And it did a couple of things. First of all, it made it a part of the conversation, but it empowered them to make that part of their day. And that was part of their leader rounding within their clinic. And so because they were excited about being able to go through this program themselves, they actually then started to share that with some of the rest of the team in the clinics. So again, he just got creative and said, hey, what can I do to kind of bring this in? And I do think that taking those small steps to be able to experience some of these wellness strategies ourselves as leaders really helps us to understand it and get the value. And it makes it more important to take that downstream to our providers and to our teams. So I think creativity with this is a really important concept, and don't be afraid to kind of sneak it in between all the rest of the stuff that you have to do in your day. So those little steps, Graham, because you mentioned taking those little baby steps, it's very important. So Jean, you mentioned in our talk about looking at metrics in regards to at-risk providers. Are there any particular metrics that you've used as you've gone along in this journey that have been really helpful for you?
Metrics are just a struggle right now for this kind of work. I've been thinking about this one a lot, because I feel like, what are the tools that we have in our toolbox already? Like, thinking about the PHQ-9, right, which measures people sort of, mental health status and where they are. And I just think that would be really great to understand if we had all of our staff, all of our caregivers, complete one of those maybe and say, where are you? I mean, I've used something called a thriving scale, and 0 is you can't get lift your head up off the pillow in the morning, and 10 is you're like humming, life is good, everything's going well. And where are you on that 0 to 10 scale, thriving scale? And, compassion fatigue is probably down here between, 0, 1, and 2. And then you've got sort of, your surviving mode, but you're not thriving yet. And so where are you? And then, look at that and say, where are you in 6 months? I just asked my nursing leaders this, how are you today compared to 6 months ago? And most people felt like they were in a better on that scale than they were 6 months ago. But we still have a lot of folks, we're still coming out of this. And I think, we've got to find ways. I'm predicting, and we're already starting to see a little bit, that we're going to have, especially in nursing, we're going to have a lot of nurses transferring. Leaving the profession. We've already seen some of that. We've seen that on a provider side, right? We know that's happening too. And I think, people are just tired of where they are, and they're going to say, look, I want to try something new. And what does that look like? And I think we need to measure that. We need to measure our turnover. Obviously, we need to measure our, those internal transfers. And then how many people are seeking our, EAP? I mean, like, what does that look like? What is our usage, and trending up or trending down? So those are just a couple.
Mm-hmm. What about some more kind of informal strategies that you look for in identifying at-risk providers? Graham, any thoughts?
Boy, sometimes you can tell by the way the email hits you. Sometimes it's an interaction in the hallway. You have to have your radar up all the time as a leader. You never know when someone's having a bad day. The problem with these surveys is that if you take it when you're hungry, if you take it at the end of a 24-hour call shift, if you just had a critical patient complain about something you had no control over, it's going to hit you wrong. And so because they're a point in time, I don't feel like they're the best assessment. Coming back to Jen's point, it's got to be relational. If you've established relationships, for example, her 18 reports, and she knows them, and she knows what's important in their lives, and who's lost their mom lately, and who's applying for a big grant. When she checks in about that and asks not just about the grant, but about, how things are going with that person's mom, and how they're thinking about anything in their life, she'll be much more attuned. She'll be, so to speak, another medical analogy, she'll be at the bedside, she'll be palpating, she'll be listening. She'll be getting a sense for what might be well or not well with her provider. So I'm not a huge fan of those survey metrics. I think, again, it comes back to relationships.
Mm-hmm. Jen?
Yeah, I would definitely agree. That's been a big topic of national concern right now. And there's, I'm a part of some groups that are bring together national wellness leaders. And this is something we've talked about a lot, is how do you measure well-being? And it's kind of like, how do you measure your faith, or how do you measure your marriage? Or, it's much more complicated than a metric. And it's also tough to get people to stay engaged with filling out the surveys about their mental health, because then the question becomes, so what is my organization going to do with this data? So I tell them that I reveal that I'm depressed on this little quiz, then what happens next? And will they use it against me? And to Jean's point about EAP utilization, very sadly, actually, I shouldn't say sadly, it's just a fact that physicians don't use EAP. And this is not a local phenomenon. This is a national phenomenon. And thankfully, in the state of Indiana, there's a lot of work going around about addressing that very thing and making safe spaces for physicians to get help outside of EAP. And so we can be very grateful in the state of Indiana for that work that's happening from the ISMA and from our state legislature. So those are the things we need to count as wins and to really lean on. And then measuring how we're doing, I just agree with Graham that it really has to be with knowing people and recognizing when somebody's struggling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, compassion fatigue is a huge problem. I'm also coming across providers that the compassion fatigue is also happening in the family. So I'm hearing more and more reports of, hey, can you can you help me with my wife? She's struggling. I haven't been home to, help with the kids. We're trying to do the virtual schooling, and she's really struggling because I haven't been home. I've been picking up extra shifts due to COVID. So there's a lot of other outside things that we have to kind of take a look at as well. Sometimes the stressor isn't always just the provider themselves, but it might be something that's going on in the family, and the compassion fatigue may not be the provider. It can also be, their family members. They're just done with the pandemic. So that's something to think about as well. That's even harder for us as employers to measure and have a read on, but it can also affect the provider's performance.
It is. And I want to jump in and say that that's one thing that I have been taught as a leader is the first question when you have a one-on-one with someone is, are you okay? And how are things at home? Because I've found that so often, and I'll tell someone, you don't have to disclose to me what's going on. You can just say, I'm struggling at home and leave it at that. But that actually is a tremendous driver of workplace burnout that I think that we feel like we aren't allowed to speak into. But I think sometimes at work, we just need somebody to say, you don't have to tell me what's happening, but I hear you, man, and I'm sorry. And let me help when I can.
Yeah, it definitely speaks to the need to have some mental health resources and other types of things that maybe even the family members can access as well with this.
And Angela, I did want to add one more metric, I think that we might, and this is a rabbit hole, so we don't want to go down here, but is substance use, the increase in substance use disorders and those type of things. I mean, we're seeing that in nursing. I don't know what the stats are for pharmacy or physicians, although I think it is up for providers as well. But that's another metric that we would want to watch.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. So how can we start to foster this post-traumatic growth? To use your term, Jean, I think it's an excellent one. This post-traumatic / personal growth that adds to the resiliency and to the continued ability to be compassionate with our patients and with each other. How do we start to foster that? What kinds of topics and resources do you feel like are the must-haves when we talk about this concept of a wellness program? What do you feel like are the must-haves in that wellness campaign? Jen?
I do think that creating a space where everyone knows that their support for their mental health is acknowledged. I will just boldly go ahead and say, for those of you who don't know, IU Health just made the bold choice to remove those questions about mental health from our credentialing forms. And I have friends from across the country who are just like floored that happened. And so that's just one way that we're messaging that you are supported in that way. So I think creating the narrative that we are here that we're going to break down the barriers for you to access the help that you need is an absolute must-have. I do think that making sure that the basic access to, healthy and safe food and drinks and break spaces, and those are just like the absolute bare minimum things that we can do to make sure that people have a comfortable, safe place to work. Programmatically, I do think that having a variety of options for people, because yoga and mindfulness speaks to some people. It doesn't to me, but it does to a lot of people. And so we need a wide menu of things that are, opportunities as far as like classes and offerings and things like that, that because everyone is going to have a different interest level in various things like that. So I'll stop there because I know Graham has a lot of great ideas as well.
Well, Graham, why don't you go ahead?
So I was working with a learner last week, and she was trying to get a central line into a patient who needed to be resuscitated. And she wants to do pulmonary critical care medicine, and she's been working really, really hard. She's a tremendous resident. And the time came for the procedure, and for whatever reason, be it the orientation of the ultrasound and the needle, it just didn't work out. She just couldn't get it in. And the pulmonary fellow came in, and they worked through things, and the fellow was able to place the line. And after the procedure, I could tell she was just downtrodden, just kind of that spark in her eye and that hop in her step was just not the same. So I just checked in with her. It was timely and well timed. So it wasn't, far from the event, and it was timely that it was not with the rest of the team around. And she just told me how disappointed she was, and she really wanted that. And her expectation was that she'd get it. And I had to remind her about one element of the growth mindset, which is when we fall, and we will fall, we all are fallible. We make mistakes. Things happen to us, or we sometimes are our own worst enemies. You have two options. You can fall backwards, or you can fall forwards. And I believe post-traumatic growth is falling forward. And for her, falling forward was all the things, recognizing all the things she learned from not getting that line, all the things that didn't work, all that she learned from getting the consent and prepping it, all the things she did right. The fact that she had that fellow by her side who gave some extra pointers and what she learned from that. And so I just had to be very intentional with pointing out the positive, because as humans, we focus on the negative. For every one negative comment in our life, we need 5 to 10 positives to counteract and counterbalance it. So I believe post-traumatic growth is 3 main elements. Number one, falling forward and being more appreciative of what we're learning and how we're growing, like really intentionally digging in there. Number two, being candid. We need more candor in medicine. This is why I applaud IU Health for taking that stuff off. We want people to be able to freely share when they're struggling and not feel that it's going to come back on them or be reported. In our leadership one-on-ones, we really want to encourage candor. And one way to do that is by being candid and vulnerable ourselves. So admitting, hey, I've missed central lines before, and I've made medical mistakes before. And here's some areas where I'm struggling and working in my life. That'll really improve that two-way communication. And then finally, we need to celebrate. Serotonin is released when you tell someone you're proud of them. The feeling of accomplishment is dopamine. And so as leaders, we need to celebrate our faculty, our nurses, the fact that we had positive outcomes and saved lives in COVID. By celebrating wins, we win much more than, and I think we take for granted sometimes, the power of positivity. So I think those are 3 big elements of the growth mindset and falling forward.
Yeah. Jean, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'll just add that about, I don't know, 2 or 3, maybe 4 years ago now, our providers established a physician well-being center and dedicated, I don't know, I mean, it was funded by our providers and several $1 million dedicated to physician well-being. And it's turned into provider well-being because it includes our APPs now. But, you know, I think that's been a really important piece for our own physician mental health, if you will. There's some concierge services in there. There's physician leadership academies. There's just lots of different things that are engaged there, and we've resourced it. For the rest of our caregivers, we've done a lot. We have a caregiver well-being committee, and it's populated with some leaders, but a lot of first line or frontline people who are, you know, are in the ditches all day, right? digging ditches all day. So I think that's been important. And then again, I mentioned our RISE team and, you know, just listening sessions. We do something in nursing, and they're really turned multidisciplinary now, called salons. And this is not a place you get your nails done, okay? But they're called nursing salons. It's based on the old Socrates Cafe idea, where you just, everybody gets to kind of check in. It's small groups, and we check in and we say, what's on your mind? And then we sort of gather a topic out of that, and then allow people to sort of just, again, have listening sessions. And, you know, that's not for everybody, but people are really enjoying it. So I just wanted to add those couple.
Yeah.
And I'll add one more thing that, you know, about effective well-being strategies and things required for well-being and programming. I will add what's evidence-based and widely written about by Tate Shanafelt and colleagues, which is that someone has a dedicated voice at the executive table to speak on behalf of the well-being of all constituents. So in most organizations, that would be called a chief wellness officer or an associate dean of wellness, or whatever the title would be, that someone who has protected time, whose job at the table is to say, how could this affect our team? And how will this be perceived, and how will it affect the overall well-being of our constituents? So someone whose constant lens and constant voice is from that perspective, I think is essential as well.
I love that. A wellness ambassador. A wellness ambassador. That's awesome.
You know, that sounds actually a very cost-effective position, because when you look at what potentially the cost savings are for the organization, it can certainly maybe justify that, having a dedicated person and having that be their job, for sure. So one of the things during the pandemic and even prior to the pandemic was our holistic nursing group. So we have a lot of our nurses who have undergone holistic nursing certification, and they actually have a kind of a rapid response team, and they use sort of a code lavender sort of strategy, where if there is a unit that's had a bad day, let's say they've had some patient losses or difficult family members, people are stressed, that the team can actually, any employee can call and say, hey, we need some assistance on this floor. And those providers will round on that floor. They might provide anything from a listening ear to a hand massage, or perhaps a well-placed snack, or a easy to heat up meal if somebody has been so busy that they haven't had a chance to even get food. So during the pandemic, our staff from integrative medicine actually went and helped out with this holistic response team and actually rounded on the floors during the pandemic. And that was something that the physicians and the nurses were so surprised and encouraged. They said, you guys are still here. And we considered that an essential position on our team, to actually be on the floors and rounding on our staff and providing these little things, whether it was a lip balm or a little heat up meal quickly. That went a long way to helping our team know that they were being thought about and being cared for, during this time. So sometimes it's the smallest of things that really help to inspire us, when we're on the fly, on the floor, and putting in best efforts. So it can take a lot of different ways to present there. I think too, when we talk about lifestyle medicine and we talk about those pillars of wellness, when we talk about nutrition, exercise, sleep, and stress management, and avoidance of toxins, whether that's toxic relationships or toxic chemicals, right? Talking about those pillars and providing some sort of strategies on those pillars to help our providers making sure they're getting adequate rest, making sure they're taking their allotted PTO time, and able to get good quality meals and things when they're on call. Those things are really, really important. I think a lot of our health systems have paid good attention to that. Certainly over the years, things have improved in that. And I know, Jen, that you have a particular interest in nutrition. Do you want to make just a couple of comments about the importance of nutrition and reducing stress in the body?
Yeah, sure. And I think you bring up a great point that any provider, whether it's a nurse or physician, an APP who's working a very long shift, frequently doesn't have the time to seek out healthy food. So, I think that is a really important piece. And I've tried to talk to my team about, this is why I pack my lunch and pack my meals. I come into they call me the bag lady, because I come into the hospital with 4 bags every day: my purse, my computer bag, my workout bag, and my lunch bag. And so when I'm on a 36-hour call, I pack lunch, dinner, lunch, and a couple snacks in between. And so they call me the bag lady. But I really believe that is one of the things that's helped me maintain my energy and my sanity taking long calls, is because I know that I have healthy food sitting in my office, and it's not time dependent. I don't have to order food. And it helps my energy stay up. So I really stressed that with some of my teams about it's cost effective, and it does really help your mental and physical health. So yes, those things are important. We have a gym facility in our hospital. It's tiny, but it's lovely. And I go down there post call, and it makes all the difference in the world to get on the treadmill for a few minutes. So having those things available to your teams are just really essential. Sometimes when I'm on call, I'll just go down to walk on the treadmill for a few minutes. So those things seem small, but they're actually huge to our team members. For a short period, we gave free access to the gym to our nighttime critical care docs, and they absolutely loved it and appreciated it so much. So those things actually go a really long way for ourselves, and as a token of appreciation from leadership to people that, hey, we care about your your well-being. As a leader, I try not to schedule meetings before 7 or after 5 to try to protect family time. And if that's your only time to go to the gym, then I try to make sure people have that time. So those are some practical strategies that I've tried to do for myself and my team.
Those are good examples of the fix the clock analogies. There's some little things you can do, like fix that clock, give the free access overnight, that mean a lot. Great examples.
Yeah, there are very few things that are foundational fixes in medicine, right? And so when we take a look at just maintaining the body with nutrition, with sleep and movement, just those 3 things right there go a very, very long way to helping with our physical and our emotional resiliency. So as leaders, even while you're doing your leadership round, some of the things that you can do is maybe ask about, opportunities, have you had a chance to check out the workout area? Or what do you think about the cafeteria offerings? Is this fitting your nutritional goals? So those kinds of questions are interesting to kind of throw in there as well. You might be surprised by some of the answers that you get for those, and from shift to shift, because a lot of times the offerings are very different. Sometimes the cafeteria's salad bar is shut down. We don't think about it if we're working the day shift, but the night shift, that might not be an area of the cafeteria that's open. Maybe it's just the grill, and so you don't have access to those healthier food choices.
I've got a funny quick example on this one. So the fried chicken tenders were really popular back at Wisher. We moved into Eskenazi. We've got a garden on the roof, and we have light in this place like we've never had before. And we had a new focus on wellness. So as part of that focus, we decided fried chicken tenders are not really good for anybody, even though they are comfort food. We want to go breaded. Makes sense. It's healthy. It's still chicken. Let's bread it. Let's have a healthy option. So we breaded the tenders. That was a bad idea. Nobody liked the breaded tenders. The residents hated the breaded tenders. The ED staff said, I'm at 2 a.m. All I want is some fried chicken tenders. They are comfort food. Our jobs are stressful enough. Now I've got these breaded tenders and they taste like cardboard. So what we did, this was our clock moment. We brought in every vendor we could find from Indianapolis that makes breaded chicken tenders. We had a spread at 2 p.m. and then 2 a.m. And we invited everybody to come taste test and drop a vote for which are the best breaded chicken tenders. Then we got our vote and we switched to the best breaded chicken tenders we could find. And it turned out to be this kind of collaborative. Everybody was talking about the tenders. There were votes. And it just created an atmosphere of togetherness, of oneness, and we were fixing a problem at the same time.
That's a great story. Absolutely love that, because certainly, food touches our emotions as well. And, I remember the chicken tenders at Wishard back from training. So some great ideas of things to definitely try to include. When we talk about input from the providers for gathering information about this, what kinds of platforms and techniques have you used to kind of throw out the questionnaire or get the survey, so to speak, from your team? What methods have worked the best for you?
Well, in the era of survey fatigue, I'll speak for myself. When I get a lot of surveys, I start just deleting them. So that's one technique, which I think is valid, because we do get, some good feedback on those surveys. But I think for myself, I've learned the most by kind of going on some listening tours and just sitting down with small groups of people. And I have like my feelers. Like I've got my 2 buddies who are internal medicine docs, and I check in on them frequently. I'm like, tell me the buzz. What's going on? Tell me the buzz. And so like I have my like embedded spies in various areas of the organization who know I'm going to tap them on the shoulder and ask for their perspective on how their team is doing. And I find I get the best data from those people, albeit not formal data, but kind of the word on the street information. And then also with my own team, I'm finding a lot in my annual reviews with them, because they're one-on-one. And so I'm asking, tell me how you're doing and what we can do better. So it depends on the size of the team that you're looking for to get information from. But bottom line is I would just encourage everyone to remember that surveys may not be the best tool, and to think more creatively outside the box to get that input.
I agree. And, you know, one theme I'm seeing this last half hour hearing from Jen and Jean is that of spaces. Jen has used the term twice. She said create spaces, and Jean used it when she talked about salons. And I think spaces are really important. If there's anybody on this call today that works at St. B's on 86th Street, you know the space that's called the Surgeon's Lounge. And this is a space they've created for the physicians, PAs, NPs, where they have a Starbucks machine, flat screens, they have food and snacks and all these things. And I remember from my time there that space was incredible, because you could be in there, maybe writing your notes, maybe catching up on the news, and the infectious disease consultant comes in and you talk about a case. Or the thoracic surgeon and your kids are on the same soccer team and you catch up. Maybe you have an event in that space, like a networking event, or welcome new providers in, whatever it might be. I think spaces are important, because spaces are where relationships are allowed to happen and conversations happen. And so I don't have a perfect answer to your question, but I would like to see spaces implemented. I would love for all the hospitals to embrace wellness through exercise spaces, food spaces, and collaboration spaces, like that one at St. B's on 86th Street that works so well up there.
Yeah, gone are the old time physicians lounges where we were small enough to be able to do exactly that, what you were describing. Jean, you have some ideas.
Well, I was just going to say, you know, for folks other than providers who have, you know, we have break rooms, right? It's their own lounge, sort of definition of lounge. But the thing is that we kicked everybody out of those when COVID started, because they were too close together. We realized people were taking off their mask and eating and spreading COVID. So we just continue to pull people apart, and what people need is to be together. And so I love that idea of creating spaces. And I agree. I mean, we don't even survey people anymore. I mean, I think we do some assessments. I mean, you know, like that page Q9 is one of those assessments that we do on patients. But I just think, you know, that you have to hit it 7 ways, right? It's like emails don't work. You know, I mean, they don't work for me anyway. There's just too many of them, right? And I just click away sometimes. So I think we just have to find what works for everybody. So 7 different ways to, you know, to communicate, to get feedback, to listen, and, you know, and just to provide support. I mean, I know we've tried to really leverage our foundation, because they've come in and, you know, given snacks on the hospital units, even in our ambulatory clinics, and, you know, healthy snacks, and just tried to sort of be there. I love the lavender. I love the code lavender. I've read about this at other places. I know Parkview has done that. I mean, what a great thing, you know, because I think it's in the moment, right? And that's when people need it, is in the moment. So love that.
Absolutely. So the other physical distance that we have now that our systems are getting larger, we're no longer just one hospital. I know Parkview, we have multiple regional facilities, and then we have our ambulatory centers and our physician offices. What are some ideas to be able to include those people in these wellness strategies that are peripheral to the main central facilities? Anything you can think of? Any strategies that you guys have specifically done for maybe the outlying offices?
I can start. We've done we have a model of care. We call it relationship-based care. It's evidence-based. And we say at Community Health Network, we have 3 elements of leaders. We have the way we lead, the way we improve, and the way we care. And the way we care is this relationship-based care. And the 3 elements in that, and this sounds very elementary, and it really is, but, you know, self-care is number 1. And you have to take care of yourself first. And we want, you know, one of our first value, we have something called values. Our first value is patients first. So we all think that at all costs, we're going to do patients first, but this sort of flipped that around and said, you know, self-care first, and then care for each other. And how do we do that? How do we support each other? How do we come to each other's aid and that kind of thing? And then we'll be able to do care for patients and families really well. And so we have something called See Me as a Person class. It's a 2-day class. I mean, we're getting ready to roll it out. We really want to provide that to every single one of our employees. And we're doing non-pandemic weekly classes on this, but it's really resonated with folks because it takes them back to the why. I think, Graham, you talked about the why, right? And it takes them back to the why I'm doing what I am. And it lights the fire again. It lights the fire under them to say, I'm in the right job. I'm doing the right thing. I had to remember why I did all this, but it's really resonated well. So I'd be happy to share that with anybody too.
As leaders, and everybody listening today is a leader, it's important for us to remember that presence is paramount. So if you visit one of your campuses, and at the School of Medicine, we have 9 campuses, I make it a point every year to visit every one. They won't remember what you said. They might not remember what you were working on, but I promise they'll remember you came. And so if you're a network with multiple places, just go. Find people to meet with. Hang out at the spaces as they were. Introduce yourself, learn, listen, look, and I think that would carry immense value.
Yeah, I would agree with everything that Jean and Graham just said. And I would also add, similarly to going to the spaces, is that I maintain a lot of my calendar to meet with people and not be a program leader. So I don't actually direct and lead programming. I'm here to support people who are leading the programming. And that means that I leave a lot of space in my calendar to meet with people. So when I get a calendar invite or an email saying, hey, can you meet with me about wellness? The answer is always yes. And that's how I've stayed connected to leaders in other IU Health hospitals, is to idea share and always create a time for a conversation about what we're doing and to support one another. And, I would just further explore what Jean said about self-care. I strongly believe in that. And I think that when you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the bottom of that is feeling safety and having your basic needs met by, maybe the organization. And so providing that kind of support, that foundational support as an organization and as leaders, I think sometimes we take for granted how important that is for people to be able to reach to the point that they can engage in self-care. Is that, that basic foundational of, I'm going to give you what you need to do your job and have a safe place to be. I'm going to tell you that you're valued and loved and cared about. That is precisely the foundation we need to engage in the self-care that will sustain us.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I just saw a comment come up here about, providing some space to allow providers to be, quote, off stage for a few minutes to kind of regather their energies is very, very important. One thing to encourage leadership as well is leverage your virtual platforms. I think with COVID, our leadership had to get very creative on how we were interacting with one another. And the majority of our office in integrative medicine wound up going virtual for quite an extended time there for a little while in the height of the pandemic. And our leadership did such a great job and has continued these strategies of reaching out to us via virtual platform, attending meetings, via the computer, or sending out little videos on the phone of, hey, this is what's going on, and, really heard about this. This was going on in the clinic. This is a great idea, or this is going well. Just thinking about you guys, and just having that little text, pop up on our phone, on our leadership team from, our VP and some of even our higher leadership team has been wonderful. Because at least you have those little touch points. So think about those little touch points that are more than just the email, or, maybe not as intensive as actually physically having to drive to a location. Leverage your technology and being able to touch your teams. Don't forget about that. So I think that was one benefit of COVID. Actually, our team learned new ways to keep in touch with one another. And of course, now we have this lovely Zoom meeting that we're doing today. Well, our next topic that we're going to jump into here, I think, is probably one of the most important points about this whole presentation, and that is some of the barriers that we have come across in trying to implement these types of programs. And when we think about what it takes to put on any kind of wellness initiative, we have to think about the time, the talent, and the treasure. So what's the time commitment? Who are the people that we need to pull it together? And of course, the big question, how much is it going to cost for us to be able to pull this off? So Jean, why don't you start us off with some ideas about some barriers that you have come across in your efforts?
Time is number one. Time is number one. It just is. It's, you know, we have people to do the work. We have people who want to do the work. You know, I mean, we're one of the largest behavioral healthcare providers in the state. And I will tell you, I worry about our mental health providers. I mean, there was a great article in the Wall Street Journal a couple of weeks ago that talked about the people who we are seeking help from also need help. You know, they're experiencing the same kinds of things that those of us who are have been going through this pandemic are experiencing. And so I think, you know, we have to be aware of that. And I think we have to think bigger and broader as an industry how we're going to handle some of this stuff, because one of the barriers I think we have is that everybody's doing their thing, right? Because that's what we're used to doing. But this is bigger than us. I mean, this is bigger than any single one of us individually or as a collective system. And, you know, it's one of the things I love about Indianapolis is that, you know, I think our healthcare systems down in central Indiana do a really great job of trying to collaborate. But, you know, when it comes to workforce issues, everybody's competing for the same resources, right? But I think that's a barrier to us. And so I don't have the answers. I would love to hear other people's thoughts and stick something in the chat, because I would love to hear what people have to say about that.
Jen, how about you?
Yeah, I would agree with Jean. A big barrier is time. Although I will say that some of the highest yield things that we've ever done are really just relational check-ins and things like that. A couple months ago, I announced to all of the leaders that I have contact with, I said, I'm going to make this really simple. Here's my challenge to you. Add, subtract, and check in. And so I just challenged, you know, do one thing to take something off the plate for your team, delay a project or cancel a meeting or something, add something in, add a token of appreciation. Hey, I'm going to buy everybody lunch who's working, you know, for various shifts, whatever it is. It can be something small, but add something, a token of appreciation, and then check in, an individual check-in, not just a mass email, but an individual email or a phone call or a text. And so that was free to do the add, subtract, check-in, except for maybe a couple $100 for a lunch or whatever the case may be. So, but I do think that time is a major issue. Money is always a major issue. And then getting buy-in, kind of like we talked about before, is leaders feeling like it's somebody else's problem, or I'll hire somebody to deal with wellness or check the box, or somebody else is going to deal with that. And getting the buy-in for leaders to have accountability and responsibility for the well-being of their teams. So those are kind of the three things I think.
The scary barrier that keeps me up at night is apathy. People become apathetic that the clock's always been broken. We can't fix the insurance companies. I can't fix the throughputing clinic. We've been boarding people in the emergency department since I started working here 8 years ago. And with time, apathy can be so insidious. It steals people from their engagement with the institution. It is a kind of a big momentum changer when you have one person in a group who becomes apathetic. They can contaminate and infect the others in the group, especially when that person is a senior, and particularly when that person is a leader. And so apathy is something we must continue to combat and confront. And the ways we can do that are to celebrate wins. Again, even the smallest ones is a place to start. Casting vision. And when you cast a vision for a perceived outcome, for example, we're going to be the safest hospital in Indiana. That could be a vision statement. Eskenazi Health is going to be the safest hospital. What's our mission behind that vision? What are the steps we're going to take to achieve that? And then every time we take a step or we meet a measure, we celebrate that. And then we work and pull together, and we show that we can accomplish things, even big things, but they're only accomplished by taking one step at a time. And so that's one way you can kind of get buy-in. When it comes to the big subject of wellness, it's all the same. We're going to start by opening up the exercise room to the overnight intensivists. We're going to take another look at our food services. We're going to create spaces. We're going to attend an event at noon to learn more about how we can impact wellness. Then we're going to tell everybody that we attended this session and what we learned from it. That's a step. And people need to see the steps. That's the antidote to apathy. And I think we all need to take those steps.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So cost is always an issue. And, you know, Jean, you posted in the chat some very important statistics here that I'm just going to share with the group for those of you that aren't looking at the chat. But nurse burnout costs $9 billion for hospitals annually and $14 billion from the healthcare system overall. In 2017, Kronos Incorporated survey showed that 90% of nurses are thinking about leaving their hospital for another job because of poor work-life balance. I mean, that's profound. I mean, right there. And the time and the training and the cost of training for that one nurse to lose that one employee is so expensive. We cannot afford to not address this. And so I think as much as we talk about how much is this going to cost to develop the wellness program, Jean, you made the comment last week is, you know, what's the cost if you don't?
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. 1%, I might have shared this last week too, but 1% turnover for us is almost $1 million in nursing alone. And so you start looking at that, and it doesn't take you very long to think, what it means to reduce that turnover and get people to the right spots and where they want to be. And I think that's why we've got to have these internal career centers, and we've got to have a way to get people to the right spots right now. I mean, I think, I'm hearing this in our providers too. I mean, like, this isn't just nursing. This isn't just EVS and pharmacy and all, right? I mean, our providers are also saying, I'm kind of done right here doing this right now. What can I do differently? And so how do we provide those kinds of opportunities? But it is very costly. I don't know. I'm worried about it. I do think we're going to start seeing this mass exodus, and particularly in nursing. I think, we're already starting to see it in ICUs and EDs. And I think, I worry about our intensivists, our hospitalists, I mean, just who weathered this and are just exhausted.
Absolutely. So, looking at the talent piece of it, we talked about maybe having a wellness officer or somebody whose job, that's their assigned position, but yet one person alone can't cover all that needs to be done. So when we talk about putting together the dream team for our prevention program and our wellness program, who are the people that you would want to pull together? Graham, what are your thoughts?
Oh boy, I would start with everybody listening right now, that you have a heart for your organization. You have a heart for people. You have a heart to see patients cared for in a compassionate, humanistic way. It starts right here. It starts with us. And find who shares the passion. It might be a nurse who works nights 2 nights a week, but she's passionate about it. It might be an OR scrub tech who's passionate about this cause and about the relationships with his teammates. It can be anybody. Just find people who are passionate and put together your team with passionate people. Don't assign it. Passionate people on purpose have great potential. How's that? There's the tweet, Jen.
That's a pearl. That's a pearl. Jen, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so actually, I'm kind of doing that very work now, and Graham had a very inspiring answer, and I will complement his answer with a more kind of practical answer, and that's that Tate Shanafelt and Jonathan Ripp, if you're familiar with those authors, I would strongly recommend that you put their names into PubMed, and the first 20 articles you get will actually like line by line tell you, how to build this structure in your organization. You need a chief wellness officer, you need a program manager and a data analyst and a project manager. And here's what your budget should look like based on the size of your organization, your turnover rate. I mean, all of that is laid out very well in their writing. So I think you bring up a great point, Angela, that it's easy to just say, oh, we'll just assign somebody to be the wellness ambassador or the chief wellness officer, but it takes a bigger commitment than that, both in in workforce and in resources, and understanding what it takes to drive all aspects of wellness from the system level and the team level and the individual level. And if I had my perfect world, I could create my dream team, I'd also include some psychologists, a psychiatrist. I would have some, different voices at the table from each of those areas. At IU Health, I developed the Health and Wellness Advisory Council, which is a group of about 30 of us who are from across the School of Medicine and IU Health physicians. And so on that council, I have physicians, APPs, learners, communications, HR, operations. So I have just this wide smattering of people who bring different perspectives to the table as we're talking about wellness. And so the purpose of that group is to be a two-way communication body to talk about what's happening in each corner of our world, bring it to the group and to idea share and bring information back to the team. So that's worked well for us. Again, I think it depends on everybody's organization, but kind of like the sort of the nitty gritty of it. Other people have already done that work. So I encourage you to look up those authors, and I'd be happy to connect anyone about that if you want.
Jen, can you give us those authors again, please?
Sure. Tate, I'll put them in the chat. Tate, Shanafelt, I'll list a couple of them. Jonathan Ripp, Christine Sinsky, all of them are, and they'll be the top authors when you put those in. I have a number of their papers, but it'll be cumbersome to put all those papers in the chat.
Mm-hmm. So on the treasure, we talked about the cost of not implementing being very high, but how do you go to your top administration and pitch the program? Where do you look toward trying to find dollars to accomplish these things? What are the most important points to make to leadership? So if you have a group of people who are wanting to implement something like this at their organization, let's say maybe it's not a large hospital system, maybe a smaller venture, what are your ideas and thoughts about helping them put together the presentation that's going to get the buy-in?
What I look for when folks send that to me is what's the cost of not doing it, which we already talked about, right? Because the cost of that, I mean, truly, and that's hard to show because it's sort of up in the air, right? It's sort of this, you can't put your arms around it all the time, but there's a lot more being published now about workforce and what happens when the workforce turns over. I mean, like, and I didn't say this before, but like I know for nursing anyway, the higher the nurse turnover, the lower the patient experience scores. So, and that's what drives patient experience in like hospital units, for example. In our clinics and places like that, it gets a little bit tougher because now you're looking at, like smaller places. We have 200 sites of care, but that doesn't mean that, I mean, like every site is critical, right? And our ambulatory surgery centers and behavioral health hospitals and rehab hospitals, I mean, it gets kind of overwhelming for people. But if we can think of, what is the cost of not doing this? I think that's the best way to do it financially. And then, any kind, I mean, data, right? Just any kind of data. If that's be evidence-based, I'm always looking for that. What's the evidence behind this? And the more we can receive that, I think that resonates a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Great. What other kinds of barriers have you guys come across? Graham?
Oh boy. There are so many barriers outside. I mentioned apathy. We talked about, obviously, time. I've discovered that many people are familiar with the what of wellness, but not the why. Here's what I mean. They know that exercise is something that's recommended, and sleep. They understand a balanced diet, but why? And so I've had some success with equipping learners and some of my colleagues on the why behind it. So understanding cortisol and the impacts it has on our bodies. And cortisol is great for fight or flight. It's great in a pinch. But when you run through your whole day behind in clinic, stressed about the decisions of your surgery patients, worried about the throughput, et cetera, that's cortisol, high levels all day, and that wears us down. You add on top of that another hormone, which is dopamine, which again, it's good in the sense it can accomplish things. It's released in us when we check boxes off our to-do list. But if our day is just constant checking boxes, answering emails, seeing patients, and then you throw cortisol on top of that, you have a recipe for burnout, for mental unwellness. We need to learn more of the why behind the wellness. So, a healthy diet, for example, increases serotonin levels. Doling out positive comments is serotonin. Collaborating in the surgeon's lounge and talking about a tough case, oxytocin. A high five in the hallway, oxytocin. Hey, how's Tommy's karate lessons going? Oxytocin. Thank you cards. Thank you emails. Employee appreciation. Celebrating wins. All of those things are the why behind the what. And I've had some success in the barrier that is apathy, and getting people to buy in when they understand that there is real validity to some of the actions that you're taking, and they can impact you positively. Because I've had a lot of people say, who cares? Why would I do this? Why does this help?
Mm-hmm. And that's a great point, Graham. And that's a spot where evidence and looking at the literature about those kinds of things can really be helpful. You can build quite a bibliography on those points. Absolutely. How about any other barriers that you've come across?
I would add a barrier. This is probably more of a barrier for leaders, but I talk about this a lot to my teams, is that we are so spread thin. A lot of times there's so many projects, so many things that we can and should do, and where do you stop that? So I keep talking about, we are an inch deep and a mile wide. And so that takes our attention and our focus, and really, I think, adds to burnout for leaders and the feeling of not being able to be accomplished at anything because your mind is in too many areas. And so what if we could go, an inch wide and a mile deep and really have that breakthrough improvement and that really great feeling of accomplishment? And I bet we could do it faster, and then we could actually get to those other projects on the mile wide list, right? And so I just feel like we get caught up in that. I do. I keep, trying to, I get, sometimes I have a moment of clarity and I'll think, okay, we got to stop that. But that inch deep and mile wide is just, I think it just hurts us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we're at 1:17. So I'm going to go around the panel here and ask for kind of some final thoughts, tips, and tricks. If there's anything that you want to share with the group that you haven't already, or if there's something, a pearl that you have that's really worked well for you in the building of your own initiatives, please share. Jen, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, sure. I've learned so much in the last couple of years in doing this role, so it's hard to boil it down to just a couple of things. But I would just say the biggest things are listening, being very attentive. And I know we talked about the beginning of this talk, and I think all of us agreed that the concept of resilience and listening to the feedback that the physicians were like, this is a hard thing for me to understand right now. So I'm using that as an example of that's one of the biggest things that I've learned. And I think is a really key thing is to just be really attentive, because if we roll out some sort of initiative that isn't a felt need, it will totally fall flat. So just making sure that we really are attentively paying attention to what the needs are of our teams. And then just one other thing I wanted to bring up, and I know that Graham and I are Twitter buddies, and we haven't really talked about the benefit of social media on here, but Graham and I were talking about that a well curated social media feed can be a great source of inspiration. So, following people like Adam Grant and Daniel Pink and, some really cool inspirational people, as long as following each other, it kind of fills my cup as a leader and helps me stay connected to other folks across the country who are doing similar work. And, Graham has mentioned it's led to some scholarly work, and it's really been a really cool thing to leverage in the COVID era. And in fact, at the beginning of COVID, I was getting some of my clinical information from respected sources on Twitter. So don't underestimate the power of your social media, particularly with your younger constituents.
Jean?
I agree. Listening, I think, is just so important. And I love, Graham put it in the chat about having a comedian on his dream team. I'm so with you on that. We need to laugh a lot more. But I would say, as leaders, we need to understand. We all know it's a journey, right? This isn't a destination. We're never going to have this figured out 100%. But we need to give ourselves grace. Especially in this time of, I'm not going to call it post-pandemic yet, but we need to give each other grace, give ourselves grace and each other grace, and then be okay with those failures and just go on. There's a lot of change management and that's happening right now. And, we've learned a lot, right? I mean, like we've been through a pandemic. So that is something that most people that follow us will never experience again, if it's true that we're in a 100-year pandemic. And so, I think we need to celebrate a little bit of that too, but yeah, give grace.
Graham?
I would just say, find your why. I have 3 girls at home. They're ages 8, 6, and 6. I get asked why incessantly all the time. I know many of you can relate with that. They always want to know why. And so we need to know our own whys. Why are you at your organization? What is it that you're passionate about? What legacy are you looking to leave? Figure out the whys of all those who are reporting to us. Why are you a nurse here at Community or St. Vincent? What drew you to this place? Why do you love taking care of patients? And then fan the flames, encourage them, resource them, support them. I believe that any great healthcare organization, personal opinion here, it starts with the bedside nurses. That first touch, they're with the patients all the time. If they're happy and fulfilled and healthy, they're going to interact well with each other, with the patients, with the rest of the staff. So find the why, round on your nurses, your techs, your physicians, and be genuine, be candid, dole out tons of positivity, and to take one step at a time.
I would just like to add too that we're here to build a team that thrives, not just survives. And I think that's a very important difference. Certainly we are providing care, we're stepping up, we're meeting the mark, but there's a difference between just getting through and having a team that really is comfortable in their purpose and their mission, and also has a sense of a wonderful life outside of the office and outside. So wellness is a much more complex concept than just job performance. And it's really important to remember that. And the other thing that I would encourage everyone here is put on your own oxygen mask first. Very, very important that you address your self-care and you address those pillars of your nutrition, your exercise, your sleep, your stress management, sense of purpose, as you're trying to engage with other people to empower them to do the same. So we've come to about an 8-minute mark. I'm going to turn things back over to Rodney for any questions that the group might have. And thanks for your participation today.
Thank you. So we'd like to open up the dialogue for questions from the audience for our panelists. So if you have any questions, go ahead and type it in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask them directly. And while we are waiting, I also want to encourage everybody to go follow our panelists. See, they've put their Twitter handles on here, so follow them, like their messages, share their messages.
I have a question, if I may, Rodney.
Yes.
Sarah, thank you all for this presentation, and Angela for the facilitation, and appreciated all the insights. I share so many of your thoughts. I'm curious how, and Jen, you spoke to it a little bit, but how did each of you model this behavior? I mean, we know it's important. We know the right thing to do. How do you model this? Because I think that's a big piece of what leaders do.
Mm-hmm. So I'll answer that in 2 parts, how I do it well and how I do it poorly. So what I try to model, like I mentioned, is, creating boundaries around work and life. I put out of office, I frequently use out of office replies. For those of you who email me with any regularly, you'll see that if I'm on clinical service, I have an email that says, yeah, you're not going to hear from me for a week. I'm making my patients my priority. And so I try to give myself that space to create those boundaries. And then how do I model it? I'm also honest with my teams. I'll tell my team, guys, I feel really burned out today. I'm really tired. I feel like I'm not doing my best patient care. I feel like I'm not leading you very well. I just lost my temper in that last meeting and I'm sorry. And so having a little bit of humility and transparency, I think goes a long way with the folks that I lead.
Yeah, I would agree. Just being genuine. I get held accountable because this is such a part of my language to our leadership and especially to our nurses that they routinely ask me, "What are you doing, Jean, to take care of yourself?" Especially if they see me sending an email at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock or later at night. And so I will say, "This is when I got to it. I do not expect you to answer. Please do not answer." But you know, they'll ask me what I'm doing, and I have to have a response. And it's more than just, you know, I'm having dinner and sleeping. I mean, it's got to be, I learned to play pickleball and I'm doing that now. I started reading the Bible from front to back. I mean, just whatever that is, but I have to show something because they are expecting that of me. And I'm so proud of that they are expecting that of me. But it is it's something that I've kind of grown to routinely ask people.
For me, just because I'm surrounded by learners all the time, one of the best ways I've been able to model is just talking very candidly about those difficult patient scenarios, the fear that we all had when we were running out of PPE, kind of the overwhelming stress of trying to keep up with all the literature and worried we were giving the wrong treatments to the wrong patients, and the uncertainty that resulted from 2020 and all the stress that we absorbed. With my closest colleagues, I just, like we've said, candidness and humility. I've also stumbled, and I think having grace, to use that word that was shared earlier, is really important. We need to model having grace on everybody, including ourselves. So a lot of patience, for sure. It's been said that as leaders, our pain tolerance needs to be a little bit higher. And I agree with some of that, but I take issue with the fact that we need to be tolerating pain by ourselves. There are other resources and ways that we can be, seeking help when we're hurting. And I think we can model that as well by taking advantage of those opportunities and letting people know when we do, if you're comfortable doing so.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you all. I have a few announcements to make before we head out. I am going to share my screen really quick. But I want to share with you some upcoming events that we have with IHEN. There. All right, so we have an awesome lineup of events that we have. And as you all know, this is the pandemic, so these events are going to be virtual, but we have a Reinventing Customer Service event that's coming up on April 28th. That will be eligible for face-to-face credits. We have a telemedicine and a healthcare delivery system program in spring. We are still working on scheduling an exact date for that. We have the Indiana Rural Health Annual Conference. That's going to be June 15th through 16th. Qualified education credits will be available for that. We have the annual event that we put on with HEPE, the Indiana Innovation and High Performance Summit, in July 21st. We have the IHEN Annual Awards Program. The exact date is still to be determined, but that's going to be in August. And we are also working on a half-day choice program with ACHE that's going to offer 6 face-to-face credits, and that will be in the fall. More information to come, so make sure that you follow us on social media, and we will send this out to you. But as you can see on this PDF, you can actually click on the different social media programs, and that will take you directly to us. And be sure to follow us so you can watch this event on our YouTube channel. You can also get there on our website. So definitely follow us, like us, and interact with us. Lastly, before I hand it back over to Phil, I want to, again, thank our sponsors. We could not put on events like this without the support of our sponsors. So we just are very thankful for their time and their dedication and their generous donations to our organization. Lastly, before I hand it over to Phil, just want to send a reminder to our physicians to complete the ISMA survey in order to receive your CME credits. All right, Phil, I'm handing it over to you for closing remarks.
Sorry. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Rodney. What a great discussion today. Thank you to our moderator, our panelists, and everyone for attending today. This does conclude our session. Again, today's session is worth 1.5 hours of face-to-face education credit. It will be applied to your account in approximately 2 weeks from today. Also, please be sure to complete the session evaluation that's located in the chat box. The recording for the session will also be available within 2 business days. Today's program is copyrighted in 2021 by the American College of Healthcare Executives. All rights reserved. Thanks everyone for attending, and continue to stay safe. Take care.